YouTube vinyl community, Temptations fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the Temptations' 1969 album, Puzzle People, released on Motown Gordy Records in 1969, September 23rd to be exact. Puzzle People is an album for me that the Temptations are really showing their strengths in numbers. By this point, Dennis Edwards had joined as the lead singer of the group. At the time of making this video, rest in peace to Dennis Edwards. He had just passed away. That guy right there. He just joined the group at the middle of 1968. So to sum up what happened there, David Ruffin was the original lead singer. He's saying, "My girl, ain't too proud to beg. I know I'm losing you. I wish it would rain." All those classics. He was getting a little too big for his britches there, apparently, and they sacked him. He wanted to be called David Ruffin of the Temptations, and he wanted to have he did a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Like he was driving in a Minx-lined limousine, as rumors report, and going to shows on his own, or not coming to shows, or coming to shows completely wasted. So other Temptations were like, "We can't do this anymore. Like this has to stop." And so what they did was basically give him an ultimatum, like, "You got to stop this stuff, or you're out." And they ended up firing him. So David Ruffin and Dennis Edwards were friends. So apparently one night, Dennis got a call to go hang out with David. David was like, "Look, man, the Temptations are going to call you tomorrow. They want you to be their new singer, not me." And Dennis was like, "I can't do that. You're my friend. Like, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that." And David was like, "Nope, you're my friend. You should do it." And apparently they talked all night. They were up all night talking about this, because it was a big deal. The Temptations were a humongous group. So to be like, "I'm out, and they're going to call you, and you're going to be in. You're going to go be a Temptation now." It's a big deal. And sure enough, the guys called the next day and said, "Hey, Dennis, you want to be in the band?" Because they all knew him too, and they were like, "All right, let's do it." So he joined, and throughout 1968, David Ruffin would pop up at Temptation shows and jump on stage and steal the spotlight and sing "Ain't Too Proud to Beg" or "My Girl," and Dennis would be like, "Okay, what the hell?" And there were varying reports that there were a couple of times where the other guys were like, "You know what? I think David's cleaning up his act. Let's get David back in the band." And then he would do something, and then it'd be like, "No, that was quick and short-lived. Let's keep Dennis." They kept Dennis for quite a number of years. So yeah, at the end of '68, they ended up doing a handful of things that became a couple collaborations with the Supremes over the next year and a half, 2 years, that were really, really good. They had that song "Someday We'll Be Together," which is an absolute smash. I think it's a great song. Is that the song I'm thinking of? "I'm Gonna Make You Love Me." That's the song. Not "Someday We'll Be Together." That's just Temptations or Supremes on their own. "I'm Gonna Make You Love Me." That was the song, which is a great song, and that was one of the first new songs with Dennis on it. And so they got Dennis in the fold. They started putting out some singles, and throughout 1969, the whole thing changed. The whole sound of the Temptations changed. The Supremes changed, and they were following into this what they now call psychedelic soul era. So gone were the big lush stringed ballads of the classic Motown sound, and then replaced with this new psychedelic approach. So you had really, really strong songs like "Cloud 9" and "Runaway Child," "Running Wild," and "Ball of Confusion." And then, this whole album, almost all this whole album. And the whole dynamic of the group changed. Whereas when David was in the group, it was mostly him or Eddie doing lead vocals, and the other guys would get bits and pieces for leads here and there. Most of the songs after this point, when Dennis joined, were all leads. They would all take turns doing a lead vocal, which I think is fantastic, especially because Paul Williams was one of the first lead vocalists in this band before David joined. So to hear him do a bunch of leads, which he was one of the best singers, I'd say, of the soul '60s era. His cover of "For Once in My Life" from the TCB show, the Taking Care of Business show they did with the Supremes, his performance of that song is unbelievable. So if you get a chance, go on YouTube, type in Temptations, Paul Williams, "For Once in My Life." The one on the record on they did it on "A Taste of Honey," I think, or "In a Mellow Mood." In a Mellow Mood, they did it on that, and that's really good too. But this live version, holy hell, you guys, it's amazing. So to hear these guys doing their own solos throughout these new albums, I think is really cool. I think it makes this era stand out on its own. And it's not just being the guy who replaced David Ruffin Part 2, it's like a whole new breath of air for the Temptations to show off what they really can do. So you had Cloud 9, as the first official album with Dennis on it. Then did another, what's it called, Temptations not on Broadway. I'm going to refer to my sheet. Temptations Show, which was a special they did on TV, basically covering some of their older songs and some of their newer ones at the time. I think they did Cloud 9, I think, on that one too. But then you get to this album on Puzzle People. And for me, this is one of the most cohesive Temptations albums I've ever heard from start to finish. It's one long combination of thoughts, feelings, that doesn't feel like there's any filler here. None of it feels like filler. All of it feels like all of them on fire, and just really trying to make a great album full of introspective music, socially conscious music, love songs. The thing that doesn't really have are any ballads, and that's kind of what they were known for, was like their slow jams. Not much of those around here. But that said, this thing was produced by Norman Whitfield, and the combination of Barrett Strong and Norman Whitfield together writing these songs, did most of the Temptation songs, is really strong on this. And the Funk Brothers are the backup band, and the Funk Brothers were basically, if you've heard AM pop radio throughout your entire life, you'll know that they played on a ton of hits, on so many Motown hits. Everything from My Girl to Ain't Too Proud to Beg to the Supreme songs to you name it, they were on it. And they do the same thing on this LP too. So, they're one of the most influential background groups. They're kind of like, Detroit's version of the Wrecking Crew, which is funny because when Motown shifted to LA, a lot of the Wrecking Crew people joined up with some of the Funk Brothers for like a combination, which I think is really, really cool. I think about the Funk Brothers, up until recently, some of their members were like, you didn't know who was in the band, which I think is kind of cool. That mystery is kind of fun because these guys were really, really talented. Anyways, let's jump into this thing. So this album was apparently their 11th studio album. They'd been a band putting out records since 1964, so this is only 5 years into it, and it's their 11th album. Some bands are bands for 20 years, and they don't even get like 6 albums. So, impressive. It hit the top 5 in the Billboard Pop Albums chart. It was number 1 for 15 weeks on the R&B charts, which I think is super cool. There's a handful of different versions of this album that were released. The Mexican LP of this came out on Capitol Records, which I think is cool. So it's got the Capitol Color Band logo, and it says, Tamla Motown through Capitol Records, which I think is super cool. The Pickwick reissue of this, which I think came out in the mid-'70s, actually has like pieces missing from the puzzle pieces here, and they're missing 2 songs. It's missing a song called Slave and a song called You Don't Love Me No More. Which is interesting, they would cut songs off. I never understood when they reissued albums why they would take music off. That doesn't make any sense to me, but it did. Apparently June 1981 was the last vinyl issue in the US up until 2007, when this album was reissued again by Rainbow Pressing. It was released on cassette, I think 8-track as well. In 1970 it came out in Italy and had more of the puzzle pieces missing from the cover. The 1969 French version is totally different. It's like a circle with them in it, and it's like puzzle pieces on the circle, and it says Temptations on the top. So it's a whole different cover completely. But yeah, still really cool. So let's jump into this thing. So it starts off with that smash hit, I Can't Get Next to You, which is absolutely one of the most intense and fun Temptation songs they've ever put out. They're so confident throughout this entire thing, but in that confidence, there's a whole lot of fun. I mean, the music is just explosively groovy. It starts off with them just like screaming and yelling and hollering, and it's great. They're totally into it. Then that little piano riff comes in, and then I can turn your gray sky blue. It's just, you jump right into it. And the vocal trading between all of them, I love that all of their vocals stand out so much from each other. You got Dennis in there, you got Melvin with the low notes, Eddie doing the high stuff, Paul's doing his thing, and once in a while Otis gets a solo in there too, which is cool. But an absolute smash of a song. It keeps your head bobbing the whole time. Just the amount of emotion and tension that is in this thing. And I love that they all take turns. I mean, for me, that's what makes this song so fun, is that each member gets a time to shine on a really, really excellent track. Easily one of the best Temptation songs ever. I've loved this song since I was a little kid. I think it's one of the best songs they've ever done. Yeah, totally a funky song. I think it's a prime example of one of the best vocalizations the Temptations have ever done. Up next, Hey Jude, the cover of the Beatles song. I think it's really cool. It starts off with these like charging military drums and chimes, and then leads it into the Temps changing vocals again. For me on this song, Melvin's bass is a highlight. I like when he comes in and does his solo bit. For me, I just really like his voice. I think it's great. I wish I could sing that low. I can't do it. I also think Otis gets a little more vocal time on this one, which is cool to hear his voice. I like that a lot. I also like the ending of this song. Instead of doing the whole na 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 frame, they do their own song titles, which I think is so cool. So they talk about Runaway Child, Running Wild, Don't Let the Joneses Get You Down. So they invent their own refrain. They take a song that's so popular and make it their own, which is a gutsy move, but they totally nailed it. I love that version. Speaking of Don't Let the Joneses Get You Down, that's the next song on here. Really cool bouncy bass on this thing, really steady piano. The shrieky wah-wah guitars throughout this thing I think are super fun. The organ swells and that hi-hat that just charges the entire time is super cool. I also love that Melvin also does this ha thing. After he'll say a line and go, huh. I think that I love that. There's a bit of humor in there that keeps the whole thing kind of, not light, but it shows that like they know what they're doing and they're really confident when they do it. The chorus on this song is real swinging. Like, you know, the swooping vocals that come in, you know, following one after another is very, very cool and well timed. The execution that these guys had, and their timing and their phrasing and their punctuation with their vocals are just unmatched. These guys were just unbelievable. I love the horns. I love the real smooth harmonies going on in the background. And also mentioned Cloud 9 at one point near the end. So I think that's cool. I like that they can reference their own songs because it doesn't sound cheesy. It sounds cool. It's like, hey, you know, we also got, you know, this is kind of what we're going through. This is our time to talk about this stuff. And I love that. The next track on here, Message from a Black Man, is a very, very deep song. It's an anti-racism song. And I think it's so perfectly and eloquently put together. Just saying like, hey, you know, we're all people. Like there's a great line on there. It goes, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, just like me. I love that. It's like, hey, you know what? You might be white, you might be black. We're all people. Like this is how we do it. We should just get along, man. This is how it goes. I love the deep organ throughout this track. I love the really fuzzy guitar work. And the repeated refrain on this thing, you know, no matter how you try, you can't stop me now, is very moving. Very moving. They're calm, they're confident, and it's hypnotic. And you kind of get wrapped up into that vibe. And then when Dennis yells, you know, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, it's unbelievable. It completely grips you. And you know, I didn't grow up in the 60s, so I wasn't there when, you know, like all these race riots were happening and racism was even more terrible than it is now. I can't believe in 2018 we're talking about racism, but you know, to have lived in an era where it was so much of people's lives and segregation and all this craziness, you know, to be proud of who you are, you know, and in a time where it's hard to be like that, it's striking to hear that vocally. And apparently they never played that song live. I guess the guys thought it was too like I read a quote where they said it was too forward thinking or too ahead of its time or something, and I'm like, no, that would have been a great song to play. And apparently it was a big request on radio at the time. But very moving song, very moving song. And then they do a cover of It's Your Thing as the last track on side 1, which I think is great. Dennis has this cool echo on his voice the whole time. Upbeat, groovy guitars, you know, the non-stop tambourine throughout this whole thing, which I think keeps that moving vibe going really well. Yeah, just a fun song, smooth bouncing bass lines, the guitar solos are cool, like the charging drums make it really fun. Great way to end side 1. Very cool. Side 2 ends with a cover of Little Green Apples, which is apparently Paul Williams completely on his own. I didn't hear anybody else on that thing, which I think is great, because Paul's voice is one of my favorites. I think he has a very raw, very, I'm going to say loose but controlled at the same time. It's hard to explain. There's so much emotion and soul in his voice. That's just a gripping performance. Every time, every song I've heard him sing is just like he captures your imagination, he captures your heart, and just runs with it. I love his voice. Even for a song like Little Green Apples, it's not the most serious thing in the book, but he totally nails it. I really like that song. You Don't Love Me. This song is great. I really think this could have been a big single. I mean, Eddie gets his first like totally lead solo on this thing. The wah wah guitars again, the fuzzy solos, the really bright riffs from the guitar, like springy kind of riffs. The shaking hi hat. It's got this big walking bass line. It's just a big expressive pop track. It almost, for a few songs on side two, kind of echo the older Motown, but with a newer slant. So it's not exactly psychedelic soul for a couple of songs, but it's like if psychedelic soul was playing Motown records from a couple of years ago, but it really, really works. I love it. I love Eddie's voice on this thing, and the drums on this track are far out. They're like all over the place, but it really, really works. Instead of having that, I don't want to say tired old approach, but like, you know, a lot of the Motown drums kind of have the same feel, which is a good feel, but, you know, they kind of shake it up a little bit on this, which I think is super cool. Since I've Lost You is track 3 on this thing. I want to say Otis starts off singing this, but then the more I hear, I think it's Dennis, but like with a really calm voice. He's not like being as expressive as he can be. I want to say it's Otis, but I'm probably wrong. I love this song. I think it's an absolute classic track. It's got that classic Motown feel with a sweeping strings. Like there really hasn't been much string work on this thing so far, but this song definitely brings it. I think Melvin again shines with his bass vocal. Really quick line, but again memorable. And the chorus with that melody line is so good. You know, my life is so blue, baby, baby, since I lost you. Man, crazy good. Running away ain't gonna help you. Paul takes a lead on this one. Great backing vocals. Eddie really shines on this thing too. Musically, it's like kind of chill, but not sleepy. You know, there's a handful of layering going on here, but it's not as like, I would say like exciting as some of the other tracks, but still very fun to listen to. That's the way love is. Classic Motown flavor. Dennis has the amazing voice that we've loved for years. I think he has one of the best voices in pop music history. You know, and once the tempo on this song is cool because it changes. It speeds up, then it slows down again, then it speeds up, and they work really well with those changes. I absolutely love that. The track just keeps your head bobbing the whole time. You know, like when he sings "Hurt by Love" so many times, it's one of those things where you just believe him because he's got that kind of voice where it's like, yeah, oh, okay, I get it, I believe you, man. And the last track on this album, "Slave," is a very, very interesting song. From what I can read about it, and from what I've read into it myself, a lot of people have said this is a song about prison life and injustice in the prison system. You know, it's a really deep song. I mean, some of the lyrics are just crazy. You know, like "Free me from this ball and chain, somebody help this slave." You know, so I can't tell if it's exactly about prison or if there is some sort of connection with, you know, being of its time. You know, maybe it's like another part of "Message from a Black Man" on side 1. Maybe it's something to do with that. Just living through that era, you know, and constantly being put down for who you are, what you look like. Which again boggles my mind. Racism is stupid, and if you're watching this channel, I also hope you agree that racism is stupid because it's stupid. It's awful. But I mean that it was just so everywhere at that time, which boggles my mind. But yeah, this song it goes on for a long time, and I think that's to do with making it feel like a prison sentence, like you're there in jail for a long time. You know, it's a real groove-oriented track. There's non-stop fuzzy guitar parts happening throughout this thing. The wah-wah pedal is in full effect throughout this whole track. The music just jams. It just jams on and on and on. And again, it's one of those things where you get locked in that groove, and you just totally fall into that world of this song. Very, very interesting track for sure. Yeah, so I mean, overall, I really do enjoy this album a lot. I think it's one of the most cohesive albums. I love so many eras of this band. I'm a big fan of these guys. You know, for the next couple of years after this, Eddie and Paul were still in the band up until Just My Imagination came out, and then they left right after that. And then after that, things kind of changed. You know, Richard Street came in the band, and you know, a couple other guys, and they had on and off success. But a lot of the '70s were kind of hard for these guys, and they had a couple of hits in the early '80s. Especially with the reunion tours they did in 1982, I think, with like every Temptation who was still alive at that point was on it. Yeah, and they're still a band. You know, they're still around. You know, like Ron Tyson's been with the guys for like over 25 years or something now, and Otis, who's still in the band, He's the last surviving original member of the group. He's still out touring all the time, making people happy with these great songs. So there's a lot of eras of this band, and there's a lot of changes they went through and styles they went through. Up next, after the psychedelic era, they went through that like sweeping cinematic soul, I think is what they called it. Papa was Rolling Stone. And I guess just my imagination you can throw in there too. But yeah, um, I love this. I love this group. There's so much to know about these guys, and I want to know more about them. But yeah, this album I really enjoyed a lot. I'd probably give this an 8 or 9 out of 10. I think it's a super solid listen. Just a great album. Really, really intense vocals, lyrics that were about what was happening at the time, and some love songs. So I mean, there's a good balance of heavy stuff and lighter stuff. And it's well sequenced too. I think the sequencing on this thing was great. And I love that they made their own refrain to Hey Jude. I think that's just absolutely amazing. But yeah, great album. Rest in peace to Dennis Edwards. He had one of the most amazing voices in soul music history. So rest in peace, Dennis Edwards. Temptations, Puzzle People. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with the Temptations, Puzzle People, released in 1969. Pick it up if you don't have it, or dig it out again and give it another listen. It's a great album. So that's it. Until next time, my name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.